Hello, dear friends. Welcome to our Bible class. This is the Principles of Leadership class provided by Maryland Bible College and Seminary and taught by Pastor Thomas Schaller. Let's start our class with a word of prayer. Dear Father, we thank you for this opportunity to be in your classroom. Thank you for Pastor Thomas Schaller. Thank you for this class. We ask you to bless it, anoint it, and speak to us, that we could hear your voice and we could receive your wisdom for our daily life. We pray, Father, in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
All right, so we can take a couple questions, comments. So regarding this one here, have you ever had maybe some need to talk to somebody, but you didn't know what to say? Sure.
Pastor Brian Lane said a while ago, he said, Pastor Lane said this one time, he said, did you ever notice you could be away from a brother for like a year or 2 years?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you see them again and you speak with them. And even though there's been a couple years lapsed between you, nothing has changed. Like you're still one in spirit. And I just love that. So
beautiful. That's really good. Even you're one, and there isn't really any need to address any issue because there isn't any, right? It's a spiritual thing to have the same spirit in one. Yeah, and not needing to go back, dredge things up, or talk about things, or make a problem, but sometimes I do want to put it in the context of soulish life versus spiritual life, yeah. Okay, Josh, did you have something or a question? Josh said in the break a little bit that he learned the hard way something, I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
what did you learn the hard way, like riding a bus?
This maybe maybe you do know what to say. Like, maybe you know that something's wrong, but maybe like when to address it or how you address it, how you say it. I'm just admitting like, hey, I've definitely failed in that area. I've definitely maybe said it not at the right time, maybe too early on a situation where God is waiting to be gracious. He's much more patient than we are.
Yes.
And like this Nehemiah 2:5, was it 2:5?
Yes.
Nehemiah is having a conversation with a person, but also first, before saying anything, going to God. So getting like God's heart for that person before you speak to them.
And do you notice what Nehemiah said to the king? He was afraid because he was sad. The king noticed it and said, why are you sad? And he said, I prayed to God. And then he said, O king, live forever. And so, I don't want to make a joke of that at all, but sometimes that we need to realize, like, set the context and say to the king, I am for you. I am for you. O king, live forever means I am for you. I wish you well. I want the best for you. So sometimes when we are talking to people, we don't know what to say, and it might be good to follow Ephesians 4:29. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but edify. And why not wish the best? I like Indians and Indian culture because they have like high regard for their elders, I feel. Is that correct? High regard for the older people, high regard for their elders. And that's a beautiful thing, especially because I am one of them now. But I mean, I feel it. I feel the honor and the kind of respect that people have, and it's helpful. But what if we were that way with each other, and that we had this meekness and this prayerfulness about how we relate to each other? Okay, anything else there? Is that good? So Josh said he learned by the hard way. I don't know really what you mean exactly. You said the wrong thing at the wrong time to the wrong person.
Or maybe the right thing, something that needs to be addressed, but maybe not by me. Maybe they need to learn to hear from God themselves about a situation.
Yes.
And it's not my place to address that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it could damage a relationship, or they may not receive from you any longer and think you're being harsh or something. Yeah.
And maybe when we're brought up in a church, how many of you have been brought up in another church other than this one? Greater Grace. So you've been in another church. You've been brought up in a legalistic church, maybe then you might be too hard on other people because you may be judgmental, If you're brought up in a liberal church, maybe you don't have much to say to other people, and you're careful not to be judgmental. But somehow we want to hold each other, we want to respect each other, but we want to be free to help. Look at this Galatians 6 verse for a moment. Galatians 6 verse 1. Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, anybody know what a fault is? What? Yeah, error, mistake. Is it hamartia or is it paraptoma? This word in the Greek is paraptoma. It's more like a careless mistake, Like you're not you are responsible. It shouldn't have happened, but you've been caught by some foolish thing that you did. Then who corrects you? It says, you which are spiritual. Now this is an observation I have in church life. When somebody makes a mistake, you know who corrects them? They that are carnal. They go to them and they judge them and they correct them. I've noticed that. So that's too bad. Like somebody messes up and then the policeman comes, the church policeman. The church policeman comes and they correct them, and it's too hard. And they feel judged and they're not restored. That happens in church life. So when you might say, I'm not correcting anybody, but what if you are spiritual? And if you are spiritual, then you can help them. But you might also be spiritual and say, I'm not getting involved, and I'm not saying anything, and I'm not doing anything about it. But be careful with that you would do nothing when maybe you're the answer, because if you don't do it, maybe somebody carnal will come, and the carnal person may come and judge them, and then you lose the person because they're not being restored. Okay, do you follow that? So I don't want to make it sound too complicated. I did, but I hope you yeah, okay, let's give it. Let's look at the verse. It just says what if a man is overtaken in a fault, you which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness. Now, what does that mean? It means I got to have a talk with you, Like I think that thing that you did with that girl, like you made some bad judgment, and like it's not a good thing. But I want you to know I could do that too. So this is like the spirit of meekness. Like you're not judging him, but you're like saying there was a lack of wisdom there. And I want to be praying with you because this can never happen again, something like that. Or, you borrowed the car, you wrecked the car, the brother is offended, we have a little bit of a mess, let's have a talk. But it's not to judge, it's to restore. It's like in the spirit of meekness, let's seek God and how we can solve this problem, Let's come together, let's talk and pray about it. No, I don't want to talk about it. I'm leaving, That's how some people will deal with it, and of course. But, we're not wanting that to happen. We're wanting to face the thing. We're wanting to go to God together and find God's solution for it, and see restoration, not division and separation. You know what I've noticed? Somebody said it happens to sometimes the seniors at GGCA. They might say, I'm not like Christina is here in Bible school, which is amazing. Like she's so sweet, that girl is really. Okay, let's take a moment. And like they say, I've been here all my life. I've been in the GGCA all my life, and I don't think I could go to Bible school and so on. And I feel like that just takes some thoughtfulness and go before God with that thought and find out what God's will is for me. Because that can't be a reason for me not to go to Bible school. Like it can't be that I've been here already so many years. It's got to be a deeper thing. Does God want me here? And what does he want? How much am I going to learn? Who are my friends? How am I going to live, So that this can be done in a spiritual way. Okay? Verse 1. Restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens. Anybody know what that Greek word is for burden? I don't know myself, but let's put down the word burden here. And bear one another's burdens. And then there's another verse. Verse 5. Every man shall bear his own burden. There's two words there for burden. This is verse 5. This is verse 2. Every man bears his own burden, and then we're to bear the burdens of others. So what's the difference? The difference is the word for the first burden is a very heavy burden. It's a burden that is really like a burden a donkey, could carry, a heavy burden. We are to help others that have a very heavy burden. But then when it says verse 5, every man is to bear his own burden, it's a small burden like this one. So everybody is to carry their own burden this way, the small burden of your own responsibility. And then when my brother has a huge suitcase that he has to carry, I come alongside him and help him carry that while I carry my own. Okay? Yes. Yes. Yes, that's right. I don't have the words, so you have the words. Yeah, I don't have them in my memory, or I didn't even prepare to say it, but that's the meaning. One is a burden that is very large that somebody needs help with. Let's say somebody loses a job, loses a family member, gets cancer, is depressed at home. It's a heavy burden. So we are to realize that, go alongside them and help them carry that. But then everybody has to carry their own responsibility to live with God. I think that's what this one is. My trust in God, my simple faith in God. I trust God. This is my everyday burden. Yeah. And, yeah, okay. So, let's go to Proverbs. Jesse, did you want to say anything or no?
Did you want to do the Galatians?
We want to do the Galatians. I think maybe we will, yeah. Let's go to Proverbs 29 first. And we have, I really believe that when you're in Bible school, you have to learn these two things here that we mentioned earlier. Leave your burden, leave your gift at the altar and go be reconciled to your brother. And the second one is investment. Investment is 1 Peter, and this will lead us in the 1 Peter 4, 8 to 10. But Proverbs 29, we have verse 11. A fool utters all his mind, but a wise man keeps it in until afterwards. Now, one lesson regarding leadership speech is, let's put down there, speech. And you have the book of Job, and then you have God who talks at the end of the book of Job. He talks, but at the end. When God talks, Job is quiet. Actually, we could say very quiet. You know, Job 42. There's two portions, actually. Chapter 40, verse 4. Job is quiet because God is talking. 40, verse 4. I really believe that your spiritual words, your conversation, and your words of life, holding forth the words of life, have a huge effect on people that you are with. You know, when you have wisdom, people recognize that you have words of life. And they come from hearing from God. And Job is saying here, after all these chapters of talking, he says, behold, I am vile. What shall I answer you? I will lay my hand upon my mouth. Once have I spoken, but I will not answer. Yea, twice, but I will proceed no further. So Job gets real quiet. It's kind of in the presence of, here's a good verse, Psalm 17:2. Let my sentence come forth from your presence. I write a 7 like that. Let my sentence come from your presence. So I believe that was why Jesus could silence a crowd. There wasn't any talking when he was done, because he had the wisdom, he had the ability to make things clear, and people were quiet. But you know that there is a lot of talking and talking and talking that comes out of people's flesh, and they don't face the real problem. They are in the flesh. They talk a lot, and they talk out of bad motivation. They're not humble, but they're proud. So we have a kind of speech that's developed in the church by the Spirit talking to us. And when the Spirit says something to us, then we recognize it and we eat it like food, and we're edified by it and built up by it. So Job says this in 42 again. He said, Job answered the Lord. You see verse 1. Then these verses 1 to 6. My eye sees you, my ear, I've heard you. Now my eye sees you, wherefore I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. So that's the general posture of a person that has the fresh vision of God, So that's it. So then we have body, life, communication, 1 Corinthians 12, the gifts of the Spirit, 1 to 31. And 1 Corinthians 14, 1 Corinthians 12 to 31, I show you a more excellent way. That's love, 1 Corinthians 13. And then you have 1 Corinthians 14, prophesying or preaching. Preaching or teaching the word is the best way to edify the body. Preaching and teaching. Then after the preaching and teaching, we have the content, the spiritual mind, the heart, the message, and then we're able to talk with each other about it. Question. Nick, whenever you hear a message from the pulpit here, do you talk about it after? Sometimes. Once did that happen? It happens. You ride home with your dad or your mom and you talk about it. But you're teaching in the Sunday school at 11 o'clock, right? And then after class, do you ever talk about it? Sometimes, yeah. Because sometimes it resonates with you, and you just kind of think about it. How about you, Israel? A lot. A lot?
Because when I got a message,
yes.
First of all, my English is not good. I
yes.
go back to listen again.
Yes.
Try to digest it. And
really?
try to get a message inside the message.
Oh, you hear the message inside the message. And you hear it in French, maybe. I mean, you have it in English, but then you translate it into French. Okay.
I hear in English, like 2 weeks ago, you share a wonderful message. And this message, the next day at work, I was listening to this message all days. And I create my own message inside your message.
Really? Gee. That's amazing. That's good. Yeah, seed thoughts. Yeah, seed thoughts. Yeah. So people tell me like that day driving home, they talk about the message, or last night they were husband and wife talking, and then they come to church and they hear a message about the same thing they were talking about, and those kind of things that happen. So this is 1 Corinthians 14, edification. I'd rather speak 5 words, that people understood than have the tongues of men and angels that they don't understand. Yeah. Okay. Now, turn to Galatians 1, please. So I asked Jesse to share something about this. And this is from a message that we preached in Budapest. And it was about Paul and his conversion. It's from verse 15 down through to verse 24. There's an outline in those verses of like what happened in Paul's life. And the key we wanted to focus on was his visit with Peter for 15 days. And that's Galatians 1, verse 18. So he went into Arabia in verse 17. But I went into Arabia and returned again unto Damascus. Then after 3 years I went up to Jerusalem to see Peter and abode with him 15 days. So the message was it was brought out by Eugene Peterson in a book called Traveling Light, where he said when Paul visited Peter, I think the Greek word was historeo, and it means that when he visited Peter, they talked, they told stories, they compared stories, they talked for 15 days. Paul came to Jerusalem to meet Peter, and we said in Budapest that when they met, they are both very important and theologically very important, and both have had different experiences with Christ. Peter walked with Jesus in Galilee, in Israel, and he saw things and he knew. And Paul didn't have that, but Paul did meet him on the road to Damascus. And he saw him glorified, and he fell on the ground. And Paul's life changed. So they could talk with each other, and it would be very interesting for both of them to hear their stories. Like Paul could say to Peter, I understand you denied him. Tell me about that. What happened? And Peter could say, I understood that you were one time a Pharisee and an enemy of the church. Tell me about that. And Paul could say, well, tell me about the feeding of the 5,000. Or tell me about when Jesus walked on water. Or tell me about what happened at the Last Supper. And then Peter could say to Paul, and tell me about Stephen, who was stoned in Jerusalem, and where were you, and what happened, and why did that happen? And they would be very open with each other, not hiding, not proud, but knowing Christ between each other. Like both of them very humble and broken, and understanding that they are what they are by the grace of God. They were in fellowship. And they could have been 3 days, but it was 15 days, which is a really long time. I mean, well, I don't know. Like it just, But you can imagine how much material was covered between the two. Why do I bring this up? Because leadership isn't like in the world. Leadership is a brokenness and a transparency and encouragement and edification. Yeah. And both of them becoming very important. One an apostle to the Gentile, the other one an apostle to the Jews. And later in Antioch, Paul could rebuke Peter. He could rebuke him for, the indiscretion that happened in Galatians 2. But Peter could take it because he knew the heart of the Apostle Paul. Yeah. Okay, so Jesse, did you want to say anything? Feel free.
Yeah, like 2 points on like being encouraged, like in fellowship. Our play, what is our play on? What is the story?
Meeting a stranger, isn't it?
What? Oh, but what's the story based on? Yeah, you had it, the road to what?
The road.
Yes, and like you think about that story, how, Christ came in fellowship with those 2 disciples and what their hearts were burning inside of them. And then it's like all their problems they're talking about, oh, there's so much going on. It kind of like melted away because they were in such deep fellowship, they didn't even care what was going on. And that's so good to like get refreshed. And I thought about how Philemon, Paul would say he would often refresh me. He would often refresh me, and how you were talking just like you were told, Pastor Stevens, you guys embrace that, encouraging each other and building up each other in faith, because we learn from each other. We grow, Josh says, I learned the hard way. I want to hear that. I want to hear that. That's amazing. You failed and you got back up. You're still like, that's awesome. But then there's like the other side too. Well, there's a story. Pastor Tom Smith, his daughter, no. Pastor Tom Smith told me one time that, early in the ministry, things were going well. They were getting a lot of visitations by people from all over, And then he said there was a season where like nobody would visit them for like, it was over a year or something. And he was just very discouraged because, people weren't coming by and just visiting him like they were. And then he said like it was 2 years of that, and then a Bible college trip came. I think it was in like maybe 2018 or 17. A Bible college trip came, and it just encouraged him in his ministry again, Like here's a man that's going by faith and sometimes preaching to one person in his family. Like he needed that refreshing and that encouragement, and it's so true. And but then there's like the other side. What can you say like with David? He said he encouraged himself in the Lord, because sometimes like we will go through droughts where maybe we're not getting those phone calls or those texts or getting edified. Like how did David encourage himself in the Lord? So those are my thoughts.
Very good.
An open question. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Let's just review it for a minute. 1 Samuel 30, maybe you know the text. Do you know it? But David encouraged himself in the Lord. How many of you know that text? Yeah, let's turn there. 1 Samuel 30. So like a kind of catastrophe happened with David and his men, and it was that the enemy, they attacked Ziklag, their headquarters, and took all the children and the wives away and burned everything and carried the people away, the women. Verse 2, chapter 30, had taken the women, and they slew not any, either great or small, but carried them away and went on their way. So they were like kidnapped, and David pursued. But his mighty men were thinking even of stoning David. They were so angry about it. But David encouraged himself in the Lord. Where is that? Verse 6. That David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people is grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. And so he recovered all, chapter 30, verse 19. There was nothing lacking to them, neither small nor great, neither sons nor daughters, neither spoiled nor anything that they had taken to their. David recovered all. So that was a highlight of David's life. But I want to make a point here. David is an example for us of having lost something but being encouraged. And he had to encourage himself, because it looks like his mighty men were not there to encourage him. They were there, and they were like very great friends and great men. But when you lose your family, you can say bad things like stoning David. I don't think they would do it, but they were talking bad because they are very upset about the whole thing. But David, hearing that, like, he was able to get beyond it and be encouraged himself. So how do you encourage yourself? And how do you do that? And how much does that have to be done? The other thing is, you are with people that are encouraging. That's the other thing. So they're both at work. Both of them are part of your life. You've got to be able to do it on your own sometimes. You got to be able to have your own vertical, to be encouraged on your own, to find your way. Yeah, and you can read about men and women of God who go, they fast, or they go into the woods, or they go get away for a couple of days, and they just need to be encouraged and built up in their faith. And the other thing is to go to a conference, which happens to me, like that's the way I get encouraged a lot, by being with the brothers. It'd be like Paul and Peter meeting each other and comparing stories. I am sure after they're done for 15 days, they're very built up. They learned a lot. They heard a lot. They understood a lot. They were very humble with each other and serving one another. Nobody's proud. They're very much encouraging and wise and learning from each other. So, okay. So my takeaway for the class tonight is, coming from Hungary and seeing the body, when they are together and there's a lot of variety and a lot of different people loving each other, people step right into it and they enjoy it a lot. And they are encouraged and edified. And they have to learn to be reconciled, and they have to learn to be investors. Learn to be an investor. Learn to look at other people, pray for them, think about them, and have a word in season if that's God's will, But investing, the ministry, it has to do. It's not flattery. It's the spirit in time. Remember Isaiah 50, verse 4, it says that Jesus would wake up early in the morning and the Father would give him a tongue of the learned to give a word in season to him that is weary. That would be another outline. That's another message, because you can take that apart. Early in the morning, give him a word of wisdom in a timely way for him that is weary. And that was a gift that Jesus had. Okay? That's it, I think, right, Pastor? Jesse? Do we have questions or comments? Okay, good. Yes, Josh?
I think connected with as leaders of any degree, we're going to make mistakes.
Okay.
Connecting that thought with this, building yourself up in the Lord.
Okay.
Being able to encourage yourself in the Lord and understand that grace. And actually you come out the other side even more compassionate because you understand,
Yes.
capacity for failure, and you walk in humility, and then you're able to walk in the Spirit and be spiritual and actually restore people in the race.
Okay.
Not just striving in the
Yeah.
flesh to.
Yes. 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 Good. Great. I don't know if we picked that up on the mic. Probably not.
Oh, they heard Josh.
Hey, Jeremy. Yeah. Great. All right. Yeah, Patrick. We have 1 minute.
I was just going to ask you, like Pastor Stevens really knew his sheep. Did you kind of sense you learned like how to shepherd through Pastor Stevens when you watched him over the years?
Okay, Patrick has one question. He said real quick. I think it is Proverbs 28. The question is, verse 23. Be thou diligent to know the state of your flocks, and look well to thy herds. Be thou diligent to know the state of thy flocks. So Patrick's question is, Pastor Stevens knew his flock, right? Is that what you said? Pastor Stevens knew his flock, and he said, Pastor Scheller, when are you going to learn that? Yes, you did. Pastor Scheller, when are you going to learn that lesson?
Okay, that's the end of class. We're done.
Yeah, so it's a good. What does it mean? Like, right? What does it mean? Like, are they really listening? To me, that's the first thing. Are they really listening to God? Are they anticipating from God? If the flock is doing that, then you got a great future. The church has a great future. So that when there's a lot of confusion, division, judging, pride, like flesh in the church, is not good. It's not good. So I know that. And if that's not good, then I've got to work on that. I got to talk to them and say, I don't like it. It's not good. We have to learn to be quiet, and we have to learn to trust God. And we're going to have some prayer meetings, and you're going to make it. And I want to encourage you, but we have to start to hear from God and put all the foolishness away and humble ourselves before God and be very serious with God. And this will change our church. Okay? Amen. Great.